are live on the video recorder.
And on the audio, we all set? Okay. It's 9 a.m. on Saturday, January 5th, 2019, Municipal Budget Committee meeting. All rise for the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, roll call. In attendance, Andy Robertson, Herman Pretorius, Dave Carbone, Andrea Hoteling, John Dubianski, Joanne Bradbury, Zach Langlois, and Phil Bilodeau. And unexcused absences, I didn't hear from anyone, would be James Spillane and Alden Dill.
Don't forget about Bonnie.
I was going to mention.
Oh, I'm missing something.
Yeah. Bonnie Beaubien, who we selected last time for our appointed position, has not yet satisfied the oath requirement, so she can participate today, but she cannot be in a voting position. We have finally gotten the 6 signatures that are necessary, and therefore she will be able to participate on our public hearing and any subsequent meetings and deliberations after the January 8th, or at the January 8th public hearing.
You get to run for the position.
Yeah. Yeah, I did notice there was a notice in the forum about the dates for people who want to run for offices, and we have 3 3-year positions and 1 2-year position coming up on the ballot, so we need to encourage people to run for the offices. We have some outstanding minutes that were in the process of being updated and corrected so that they were acceptable. On December 4th, we have meeting minutes here, if anybody needs them. Anybody need minutes to look at? This is December 11th, this one's December 4th.
I'd move December 4th as written.
Zach Langlois has moved the December 4th minutes as written, seconded by Andy Robertson. Any discussion of December 4th? All in favor? Aye. Okay, that would be 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There are 8 of us that are voting members today, so that's an 8-0 vote in favor of the December 4th amended minutes. These will be posted as final.
And I'll move the minutes of the 11th as written.
Zach Langlois has moved the minutes of the 11th as written, seconded by Andy Robertson. Any discussion?
Yes.
Okay.
In line 127, I believe the year should be 2020, 2021.
Thank you. A correction to the year that's listed on line 127. It simply didn't update or get recorded properly. It should be 2020 to 2021. Any other corrections to be made?
I move the minutes as corrected.
Okay.
Second.
John Dubianski moves the corrected minutes, seconded by Zach Langlois. Any discussion of the amended minutes? All in favor? Aye.
Yes.
8-0, those minutes are approved. December 18th is listed here. However, we do not have December 18th minutes available yet. I did send an email out explaining to everyone that our transcriptionist abandoned us with no notice, and it was kind of like before Christmas they were going to be done. After Christmas she said, well, I really can't do this anymore, and left us hanging. In the meantime, Diane Kimball, who has done minutes in the past for our committee, has agreed, and she will be doing from the audio tape the December 18th minutes, and then we'll pick up for this meeting and future meetings, and we're hopeful that that will all work well. So
Thank you, Diane.
yes. Anyway, so I think we're back in business, but it's going to be a while.
Before we get rolling, I had sent you an email about this, I just wanted to see if it was okay. I have a finite amount of time today, I have to leave by 11, so can we, on the agenda, well, we don't have an agenda review item, can we set those items for the school and the town?
I was going to do that right after citizens' comments, so
Perfect.
are there any citizens who would like to make comments this morning? Okay, so Zach has a proposal, and he did mention it to me, that because of his time constraints, he was hoping that perhaps we could do the school discussion first and then flip to the town. I guess, what's the sense of the committee? I mean, the agenda went out the way it is. I guess we, would need to consent to that.
I move that we could take the school out of order.
We have
Second.
motion to take the school out of order by John Dubianski, seconded by Zach Langlois. Any discussion?
I would hope that we can wrap things up by 11 regardless.
I was going to include that in my
Oh, yeah.
motion, but I decided not to.
You never know, so I'm just
Just being proactive.
erring on the side
Good
of
thing.
caution.
Good thing.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
So we will switch the order of events here. School will go first. School, Zach did pass out warrant
I
articles.
believe everybody has them, is anybody missing them? I thought everybody as they came in. Okay. I think from a logistics standpoint, I can just move them one by one and we can discuss and go. So I'll move Article 1. Shall the Deerfield School District raise and appropriate as an operating budget, not including appropriations by special warrant articles and other appropriations voted separately, the amount set forth in the budget posted with the warrant or as amended by vote of the first session, all right, for the purposes set forth therein totaling $13,531,421. Should this article be defeated, the default budget shall be $13,408,776, which is the same as last year with certain adjustments required by previous action of the Deerfield School District or by law. Or the governing body may hold one special meeting in accordance with RSA 4013, 10 and 16 to take up the issue of a revised operating budget only.
Second?
Okay, the warrant article number 1, as stated by Zach, was moved by Zach in the wording provided and seconded by Andy Robertson. Now we have discussion. And I'd like to report back here, last meeting, I was instructed that perhaps we could get some better clarification on default budget preparation. And I spoke with Stephen Buckley, who is the lawyer at the NHMA, New Hampshire Municipal Association. And I both spoke with him and I sent him an email with a list of, this long, of questions regarding default budget preparation. He said he would not reply in writing. Lawyers, I guess, don't reply in writing.
Municipal Association lawyers particularly.
Yeah,
Because then you could hold them to it.
right. So anyway, I said, well, here's my understanding of this, and I discussed some of these issues. And he said, well, yes, that agrees with what, I went to that training session and got the new default budget interpretation. And he said, yeah, we stand by what we presented in that default budget discussion. And so here are some of the things that he's, again, is saying he stands by, but again, he won't react to specific items. One is that if you simply have something that's gone up in cost, you cannot put that excess cost into the default budget. So if it costs more for oil this year, too bad, you've got the oil budget. The second one is if you have a contract with, in this case, let's say transportation, his example in the handout that he gave out was waste hauling or something that has an escalator clause, unless you have voted on the 3-year contract as a separate warrant article, all you have is last year's amount. Now, it doesn't mean you can't pay this year's amount. You can pay this year's amount, but you have to find it from another budget line. Similarly, increases to wages that are not part of collective bargaining that's been voted on over, like for a 3-year contract, you cannot simply say, we're going to contract with somebody to pay them $10,000 more next year, and put that in the default budget because that contract amount was not approved by the legislative body, which is what the new wording says. Going in the other direction, I was asking about things like one-time expenditures, and I noticed there was a bunch of stuff knocked out of the default budget. And if you bought just one big thing this year and you're never going to buy it again, that has to be knocked out. But if you have a process of a rotation of, we're going to do 1/5 of something every year for 5 years, you don't need to knock that out of the budget because that's a recurring expense. So the fact that you always replace 1/5 of the computers, you can keep the 1/5 of the computers. Similarly, if you had an employee last year hire, at, let's say, $70,000, and they're retiring and you're going to replace them with somebody, you can keep the $70,000 salary, and if you're able to hire somebody at 50, you're 20,000 to the good, to be able to move things around. So as I talked with Stephen Buckley and read his presentation and looked at what's been done with the default budget for the school, which is far different from what was done with the default budget for the town. The town has last year's default budget and one item by law, workers' compensation. That's the only change that they have an increase for. To my mind, the default budget of the school, and I know you said you've checked with your legal, I would like to know something about what that legal interpretation is, because the law to me is very clear. And I think this budget the budget itself is a very responsible budget, and I would like to support it. But with that number in there for the default budget, I am going to vote against Article 1. Anybody else want to comment? Would anybody like to read any of the documents about default budgets? I've handed out things a couple of times.
So may I ask why you're voting against that? Or is
I-
it too low? Is that?
Oh, I have no idea what the real number should be. I'm just saying that I can't vote for something where there's a number in there that I don't think represents what the right number is. And like I said, the big number, or not the big number, the operating budget number, I feel comfortable with. I think that's a good budget number. But I don't feel comfortable continuing this process of a default budget that is not prepared as the law says.
If I may.
Yes.
So, the superintendents and the business administrator from the SAU also attended workshops and got clearly different opinions at all of those different workshops, which is why we've consulted with our legal. Our legal has advised us that we're proceeding down the correct path. We have not included raises for non-certified staff in the default budget. I think the primary items you have in question would be transportation contract, and I don't know what else you may have looked at. But those items were pre-existing obligations, and we've discussed it, and the school board is very comfortable with the preparation of the default budget and are comfortable with it being on the warrant article as it sits.
Thank you, Zach. Anybody else have a comment? What was the thing? Oh, you said,
I have a comment.
okay.
I am fully aware that if you get 10 lawyers in a room, you will get 10 different opinions in many occasions, not always, but on many occasions. And sometimes reading RSAs is pretty entertaining, given the conflicts from one clause to the next.
I grew up with a lawyer, and I'll attest to that.
Well, like I said, I guess I've not talked to all of the lawyers, but like I said, I don't even know what the correct number is because I think there's pluses and minuses here. I think there's places where you've subtracted things that you didn't need to subtract. But again, just simply because as I read the law, which I think is very clear, it says, in amounts previously approved by the legislative body, which is, the town, the taxpayers, that's why I'm going to vote as I do.
Yeah, and again, just to comment on that, I think you're referencing Section C of the law. Section B of the law contradicts Section C, especially some of the new language added in Section B of that law. That being said, our business administrator has spent a tremendous amount of time working on the default, and I think actually was very generous in what she was pulling out of the default budgeting for one-time expenditures and everything else. So again, the board fully supports the default budget as presented.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to just note that Alden Dill has arrived, so we are now 9 voting members. Thank you, Alden.
We're looking at Article 1 of the school warrant, Alden.
And we've had some discussion. Is there any further discussion? Are we ready to vote? Alden, do you want a minute to read?
No, I can go ahead.
You can, okay. All in favor of Article 1 as written?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, that's 8, and opposed, 1. So the article as written is approved by the committee.
Recommended 8-1.
Yes,
Not approved. Recommended.
recommended, thank you. No, we can't approve it. Article 2,
All right, I'll move Article 2 as written. So shall the Deerfield School District vote to approve the cost items set forth in the collective bargaining agreement reached between the Deerfield School Board and the Deerfield Education Association for the 2019-2020, 2020-2021, 2021-22, and 2022-23 fiscal years, which calls for the following estimated increases in salaries and benefits at the current staffing level. 2019 to 2020, $173,878. 2020-2021 will be $173,723. 2021-2022, $157,387. 2022-2023, $138,683. And further, to raise and appropriate the sum of $173,878 for the 2019-20 fiscal year. Such sum representing the additional cost attributable to the increase in salaries and benefits required by the new agreement over those that would be paid at the current staffing level.
Second.
okay, Zach Longley has moved Article 2 as written, and it's been seconded by John Dubianski. We're now into discussion. And this is another one where I have some issue, as you might know. I looked at some of the dollar amounts, and I've updated, I did a partial for the first meeting where we were discussing this to see, you know, what does this mean that we've gone to this new formula? And the thing that's different about our current contract that is being proposed, 1920 through 22-23, is that not only do teachers get steps, but the salary scale itself is increasing each year. And so, you know, again, I did a partial on this to begin with, but then over on the left-hand corner, what I've done is simply indicate, okay, here's what happens just for step 1. The step itself every year is going up, and at the lower levels, you can see it's going up at higher percentages, and then by the time you get to step 12 or 13, the percentages are lower. In addition to the salary schedule going up, the annual steps, there's a raise for all teachers just simply by being there for a year and performing satisfactorily. If you have a BA, it's $1,850. If you have a master's, it's $2,325. And at the lowest levels, that represents about a 5% increase each year. So built in with the steps is 5% to begin with. Then the scale itself is going up. So over on the right-hand side, I've said, okay, if you were hired this year at step 1, and you went to step 2 next year, and then you went to step 3, and so on, by the time you've gone up for the 4 years of the contract, if you had started at the lowest level, you would go from $36,503 to $49,703, which is a 36.2% raise. Similarly, if you started at master's level and went to 2 to 5, you would have a 39% raise. You'll notice that it then, as you get up into further steps, the next one down is steps 6 to 10, then there's 12 to this 13, including longevity raises. If you were already at 12.5, which is where we are this year, we don't have a 13, it goes to 13 next year, you would be getting just 9% over the period of time. So then I asked myself the question, what are we trying to address here? Are we really way too low on our salaries for the lower level people, or is it the higher level people? And so if you turn to the back, I downloaded from the Department of Education, this is the 2017-18, so it's not what we're currently under, and it's the min and max for our local school districts. I know these are a little different from what Nate had. I don't know whether there's internal information that's a little different, but this is what's at the website. And the average of the other 4 districts down at the bottom for a BA coming in was 36,598. In Deerfield, we were 36,503, so we weren't too far off on the starting salary. However, the average, if you were an experienced person, if you stayed lengthy time, it was 61,186, and Deerfield stopped at 56. Well, the difference is more having to do with the fact that we had fewer steps. We only have 12 steps when many of the other districts have gone to 14 or 15 steps. Each step for a BA is $1,850. If we had had 3 more steps, there would have been another $5,400, $5,500. Our ending salary would have been very similar. So if what we're trying to say is there's longtime employees that we're happy with and we'd like to make sure we reward them properly, my approach might have been to add more steps as opposed to increasing the entire scale. Similarly with the masters, Deerfield right now is a little bit low on the starting salary for masters, but once again, the ending salary out at step 12 of 64 is lower than some of the competing districts, but again, it's because we have fewer steps. So, I know that costs are finally going up. People collecting Social Security are finally getting a 2.8% raise this year. And so I looked around to see, well, what's happening with other salaries, and I found numerous articles online that say, from human resource sources, that say that average raises for 2019 are projected to be about 3% in the private sector. There was just an article in the Wall Street Journal that says, gee, some teachers are leaving the teaching profession because the average salaries increases in teaching next year are projected to be 2.2%. Now, I am nowhere saying that we should, somehow not be paying or compensating our teachers correctly. However, I cannot vote for a salary contract that has some people over a period of time getting 36 to 39% raises. And you might wonder what our distribution is.
But that's
Out of-
that's cumulative, right? The 39% is a cumulative.
Right, it's like from now, at the end of 4 years, you'd be at 36% higher. The wage increase per year of step plus increase is, 9 point something percent, 8 point something percent, 7, again, decreasing as the schedule says, but cumulatively 36 or 39%. Our distribution of teachers right now, on steps 1 through 4, we have 12 out of our 55 personnel, 54.3.
Excuse me.
5 to 9 are 7 people, 10 and 11 are 7. The majority of our teachers are at the highest step. So again, this is not what it's costing us because many of those teachers are at a high step already. But again, which teachers are we trying to reward here? And is there anyone, when raises in the real world for other people are averaging 3% a year, 3% cumulated might come to like 14% over a 4-year period. Is there any reason that we should be building a schedule, again, different from how we used to do it, but building a schedule that in effect builds in 36 or 39% raises for any of the teachers? Right. So once again, this is an article I cannot vote for because in good conscience, I can't say to the town folk in Deerfield, well, yeah, maybe you're only getting a 3% raise or a 5% raise, but our teachers not only get their 5% step, but they're going to be getting these 4% increments each year on top of the 5% steps. So, again, that's my thinking.
May I?
Yes,
So, just a couple of notes here. This contract, A, was approved by the board and the union. They have other things that aren't necessarily being considered in your table here are the additional time added to the school, you call it the calendar, but the additional hours worked. It works out to be approximately 2 weeks of additional labor figured into
Okay.
these numbers. You did mention that half our staff is at top step. So if you figure in the additional time worked versus the raises during that step, they're really, the benefit is more so to the newer, younger teachers and trying to get them up to the point where they can afford to stay in the profession. There's changes to insurance plans and everything else. So this is a very strong contract for the town. It's a very good contract. It was negotiated in good faith and positively by the district and the union. And so the board most fully supports the contract, and we hope that everybody else will as well.
thank you.
And I would, again, say this, I mean, the wage and step system is very common in the municipal world. I'm on the same one. This one is more generous than mine. We're 3% and 1%, AFSCME in Manchester right now. But then again, I'm responsible for growing bacteria. These folks are educating children. But you know, I mean, your numbers work out. But it's not uncommon. It is more generous than like what I'm getting right now. I don't know what the Manchester teachers are getting. But it's the exact same. So if each year I get 3% increase.
For your step?
For showing up to work for a year.
Step, yep.
And then I get 1% cost of living. And then there is also an incentive for betterment. So if I go and say get my grade 4 wastewater, I get an additional 3%.
Yeah.
And so it's
not
very
showing-
common.
Right, not showing here is, I've only picked out bachelor's and master's, but it's like, if you have a bachelor's and 15 extra credits, you're on a different scale. If you have a master's and you get 45 credits, you're on a different scale. So there are ways for people to get more than this if they continue their education. In other words, you start with a master's and then you get 15 extra credits, you would actually get more than is listed here.
Correct.
Through advancing your degrees.
Correct.
Right.
Which is, again, very common.
Which, again, I think that's perfectly appropriate, and, I could fully support that. I could support some increase because of extra hours. I just think that at the lowest levels, it's more generous than, I don't know anybody other than somebody that works on a commission or a productivity basis that would get these kinds of raises. There was something in the local newspaper about the secretaries in one of Nashua School District. They were getting, over the next 4 years, 2%, which was going to be like 2.7, 2.8, and whatever, because of steps as well. Now, I know secretaries are not teachers, but I think that this is more generous than it should be. And when I look at it, it doesn't address where I would like to spend our money. I would like our money to reward those teachers that have proven themselves and have stayed for the 12 or whatever years, and I'd like to add more steps, but again, I wasn't in on the negotiation.
Which that is actually also a difference from the way I've seen them. Usually the wage step systems are more top-heavy. But if their goal is to try to bring teachers in, that's probably why they did it the way they did.
I don't know if we're having trouble bringing teachers in. That little bit of discussion we had said we have a pretty good pipeline, and we've been able to hire teachers. And maybe if the starting salary isn't okay, maybe change the starting salary a little bit at the beginning, but then don't add 39% on top. So again, that's my discussion. Phil?
I can support this. As John had indicated, that's the norm in municipal government and teaching. And I'm very pleased at your analysis, but the one thing that I'm not seeing here is potentially the Allenstown, Chichester, Epsom, Pembroke, and all the other teachers' contracts that are being renegotiated at this time have that same situational arrangement.
I
You don't know
don't
that.
have
You
that
do-
information.
Please let me finish.
Okay.
we don't know that, and I would suspect possibly that that's the case. So your analysis is excellent, but those other contractual arrangements may be doing the same thing. So I believe they probably are, because that's what's the norm. So I will support this contract.
Andy?
Yeah, I'd like to move the question.
Andy has moved the question, Zach seconded it. Any discussion of that?
There's no discussion.
All in favor of moving the question?
Aye.
That was 9-0. So now we are voting on warrant article number 2, as presented by Zach. All in favor of warrant article number 2 as written?
Aye.
Aye. That is 8. All opposed? 1. So that is Municipal Budget Committee recommends with an 8-1 vote. Number 3, shall the school district,
Yeah, we don't need to look at that one.
That's not us, there's no money.
No money.
no money, we don't have to do it.
All right.
Okay, number 4, Zach.
I will move Article 4 to see if the Deerfield School District will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of up to $75,000 to be added to the Facilities Repair Fund previously established. This sum to come from the June 30th, 2019 fund balance available for transfer on July 1st, 2019. No amount to be raised from taxation.
Second.
Zach has moved Article 4 as written. It's been seconded by John Dubianski. Any discussion of this? Yes, Zach.
So this is adding additional funds to the, on par with what we had done last year. Last year, we requested a total of $150,000. It was 75 to be raised from taxation and 75 to be taken from surplus. We have been completing projects inside the building. We have
That was gonna be my question.
about, we've done 17,000, 30,000, another 10,000 is prepared to start, and we have about 20,000 scheduled. So we're about 50-ish thousand into the process. We have a long list of items to tackle. Some of them we can't do, obviously, while the school is up and running. But we're working our way through the list, so we'd like some additional funds to continue working our way to improving and enhancing the building.
Thank you.
I will say, going in there monthly to do the fire inspections, it's kind of cool to see the progress as,
Takes time, but we're
it
getting
it does, but it's looking good in there.
Thank you.
Zach, a few meetings ago, we had discussed perhaps getting like a priority list or like a punch list of projects you'd like to do in the school.
You know what?
Do you have a,
Last year, Zach presented this list that, from the engineering report,
Yeah.
that had a total of $1,776,450.
yeah,
Yeah, we'd
And-
asked for an update on that, the,
yeah,
which I
and
think
and I
looks like
think, I think maybe a shortened list from
Yeah.
that, just a,
And I apologize. I have one copy of it with a bunch of notes scribbled on it. Let me see. Let me just see here. No, that was another one. So, this is just some notes that I have recently. So work that was like completed, just to kind of give you an idea, that's already been done. Cleaning of the kitchen ducts and replacement of the hinge kit. And a lot of this stuff, our maintenance staff has been handling in-house, so it's significantly reduced the cost from what we receive from the engineering service. Considerable amount of well work done, updated the bacteria testing on the well, repairs to the septic system and the lines underneath the floors inside the building. We're having them hogged out, for lack of a better term. Restriping of the parking lot. We have replaced all the exterior lighting with LED. We have repaired and replaced a large number of flush valves. We had some roof repairs and inspections done. We're getting promising feedback on the roof that it is holding up, I think optimistically, might be the best word for it. We have an upgrade to our Honeywell system. Honeywell is the provider for all the controls for the mechanical systems inside the building. They have stopped supporting, or they will be discontinuing support on our servers and the system that we're currently using. So we have an upgrade going on there. Mike and Bob in-house have been able to actually reduce the cost of that project significantly by tackling it themselves, so we saved a lot of money there. work that is being scheduled now is replacement of all the stairwell treads. They're going to start replacing urinals and toilets, a new exhaust hood for the dishwasher in the kitchen, and we have replacement water heaters on deck as well.
One more follow-up question. When you come up with your list of tasks to be done, I'm assuming some of it is just general maintenance, some of it's probably, you have a ranking of safety hazards, right? You know, we have to do this in the next
Yeah.
5 years, otherwise it becomes a safety hazard. And so when you come up with the $75,000 in this warrant article, how do you rank the tasks to be done in the next year?
So that list, and I apologize, I meant to bring, but that spreadsheet that we had from the engineering survey broke out all the potential projects and items and kind of listed anything, and then it categorized them, and then we took that data and just put it onto an Excel sheet with categories that followed suit with what the engineering company had provided. Anything that is student safety related it's not, if it's a student safety related item, it gets taken care of, obviously.
Yeah, sure.
There's projects that we as the board have then slid projects up and down depending upon timeframe needed to complete them. There's some larger projects that we tabled for a season or so because what we had was working and it would give us a chance to explore some better options. But we're systematically kind of picking off of the highest priority items that the engineering company had provided, obviously with the flexibility to move items up and down that list as we see fit. The maintenance staff has been coming to us every couple of meetings with updating on the lists, and the administration has as well been providing us with updates as they've been completed. So we are working our way through it, and I think another couple of meetings, once we have a chance to kind of get the budget through and done and dealt with, we'll then be able to go back through and readdress and really kind of put the next focus on for what the summertime project's going to be when school's out.
Sure. Okay, yeah, I'm concerned that $75,000 is low.
We already have a reasonable sum of money in that account,
Okay.
so we have.
But to my understanding, and through previous conversation, doesn't a significant amount of that money get returned back to the town every year?
No, that is not surplus. That is, so this is money to be drawn from that fund balance at the end of the budget.
Okay.
So if we have $300,000 left, we'll be taking 75, if the
Yeah.
warrant article passes, 75 of it, moving it into a separate trust fund.
Okay.
So it's, and that trust fund balance currently is, I think Amber's trying to beat me to it,
Yeah.
335? So we have 335 in that trust fund right now.
Okay.
And we have, the next meeting, there'll be a public hearing to draw 50 out of that.
Okay.
To pay for work that's already been done. And then there'll be another 25 or 30 or so coming up, probably towards the end of the school year, that we'll draw out of it again. So this is to reseed a lot of that.
So the only thing that makes me nervous is I look at $75,000, and that's like 3 months of someone's work, right? When you take into account labor up and perhaps
Materials and.
materials
Yep.
and stuff like that, right? It's a full-time equivalent of, let's say, 1/4 maybe, which for all the hesitancy of the status of the building and the school and the future upgrades seems low.
We are, so the engineering estimates included subcontracting all the work out. So everything the engineering firm gave us was subcontracting the work out. There's a significant expense of doing that because we're hiring outside
Right.
labor. Our maintenance staff, who was already funded and paid for, and they're already dealt with in the budget elsewhere, has undertook a lot of the projects themselves and found the bandwidth in his day to be able to complete them.
Okay.
So a lot of what we're drawing is not necessarily to reimburse
Okay.
for his time, we're just reimbursing for materials. Obviously, there's gonna be work that's done by subcontractors, and there's certain things that we don't have the tools and the equipment to do. But a lot of the work that Mike is comfortable doing himself, he's picking off the list, so things that could have been $5,000 projects to have subcontracted out, you know, say it's a replacement of a toilet, you know, it might be $1,200 to have a plumber come in, drop a new commercial toilet, new flush valve. When it's $400 worth of materials, and we have staff on house that's comfortable doing it, we're seeing a lot of savings. So we're really working to stretch that money out as far as we can. I have to applaud the
Sure.
maintenance staff at the school. He's done a phenomenal job of really looking at the town's money and trying to make sure that he's stretching it as far as he can. So we looked at those numbers. We also had originally when the board was discussing the warrants, talked about that number and doing it differently, more or less, some other stuff. But that was a number we kind of settled in on as reasonable and responsible without asking for too much from the community and trying to, you know, but still giving us enough to continue another year's worth of projects with what we already have in that account.
Also, only so much you can do at once in the building at one time.
Yeah, I mean, unless we have small windows, we can sneak. Larger projects can either be done during vacation weeks, and those are usually already packed with regular maintenance work, or summer vacation when we can really try to hammer out some bigger projects.
And that list from last year that, you know, if you look at, I think the priorities had to do with like things within 1 year, then 2, it was like a 5-year
Yeah.
plan. And if you looked at the first 3 or 4 years, it was 300 and some thousand of things that were priorities for those years. So I think the 335 that you have already, in addition to the 75, I think, you know, I think they're attempting to keep up with what's needed over that period of
And
time.
we most certainly also have the intent of keeping a buffer in that account, because the roof, which has been this big subject of question for many, many years, we get feedback from the engineering company that says one thing, we have one roofer come out, look at it, they give us another thing. So the board has historically been intent on keeping enough money in that account to kind of cover the roof replacement when it becomes a necessity. That being said, we've had a guy up there making repairs recently. He looked at everything, made some repairs, made some quick repairs that he's going to follow up with some kind of more permanent repairs. But he's giving us some really good feedback on it, that it's holding up better than maybe we anticipated. It has most certainly, it doesn't owe us anything at this point. The roof has kind of been on the building during its whatever its expected useful life has been. But if it wants to give us another 5 or so years, we'll most certainly take it from it.
You never know what's going to sneak up on you, too. I mean, you know, we had to clear the roof. That was $25,000 gone in one day.
And some of those, I think, are the repairs.
So-
Some of the repairs we're making right now may be
Okay,
from having to shovel it off.
Any further discussion?
I have,
Anybody?
I just have a question about the wording, one part of the wording. It says you're going to raise and appropriate the sum of up to $75,000. Sounds like you need the whole 75. When would someone decide to put less than 75?
It would go to, if we only had say a $50,000 fund balance at the end of the budget cycle,
Okay.
then we
And you
wouldn't
would-
be able to take 75, we'd only be able to take whatever was available from fund
Okay, and who would make that decision?
Well, it's dependent upon what is available, what the fund balance is at the end of the year. So if we have a surplus of,
At least 75,
Then
they
we'll
will
take-
get the
then they
whole
take all
75.
75.
Okay, thank you.
and where we have multiple articles pulling from surplus, if both Article 4 and 5 were to pass and we only had $80,000, then Article 4 would be fully funded, and then $5,000 would go to Article 5.
Any
Thank
further?
you.
Okay, we are voting on warrant article number 4. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right.
That's a 9-0 recommendation from the Municipal Budget Committee. The Article 5.
I'll move Article 5 as written, which is to see if the Deerfield School District will vote to establish an equipment and installation expendable trust fund under the provisions of RSA 198:20-C for the purpose of purchasing and installing equipment, and further to raise and appropriate the sum of up to $25,000 to be placed in this fund, and to designate the school board as agents to expend from this fund, this sum to come from the June 30th, 2019 fund balance available for transfer on July 1st, 2019, no amount to be raised from taxation.
Second.
Okay, Article 5 was moved by Zach Langlois, seconded by John Dubianski. Any discussion on this one?
And if I may speak to it, so what we're trying to accomplish here is there are certain items that we cannot make repairs or replacements to out of the previous fund, the Facilities Repair Fund. And so what this is going to do is give us some money for the other equipment that's not currently covered by that fund. A good example would be our kiln is going to need to be, for the art classes, will need to be replaced at some point. We spoke to the trustees about using the Facilities Repair Fund to replace that kiln, and that is not what that fund is to be used for. So what this would do is give us a fund, we would not, smaller amount obviously, for things like kilns, equipment, specific cleaning equipment, and some of that type of stuff that we cannot draw out of the Facilities Repair Fund for.
Any further discussion? You have a So the fund names that you have right now, the big one is called the Facilities Repair Expendable Trust Fund. You
Yes.
also have a technology fund. And
Yes.
so this would create a new fund for other types of equipment that isn't part of technology and isn't part of the overall
They
school
can't be covered under
facilities.
facilities repair.
Anybody else? Okay, all in favor of Article 5 as written? Aye.
Aye.
There's a 9-0 vote in recommendation by the Municipal Budget Committee of Article 5. As far as school is concerned, then, I think the only other thing to discuss is what will be available and presented to the public on our public hearing on Tuesday evening, January 8th. I know last year I was looking at the pamphlet that Amber put together. It looked pretty complete. Would it be similar thing to last year's? And then the one thing that is a new required presentation, and I know you've always had the default budget there, but it says you must present it in the form that shows how it's done or something. I mean, there's wording about specifically how the default budget needs to be presented, and I don't know if that would change anything from what you've done for previous years.
In fact, this year, the format was different, and one of the reasons why I changed the format is so that it mirrored the DAR portal a little bit more.
Okay.
So that's why I've embedded the default within the budget, but I've also created that summary page, which really, once it translates into the portal, it translates perfectly. So you put the exact amounts in that differ, and then add the summary detail right in there,
So it'll show up that way, that they'll be able to, you'll be presenting that, like, this line changed by this much, and here's why.
Yes,
And
that's
it-
correct.
Okay. And,
Not by line, but by account. So like 1,100 accounts, 1,200 accounts. It goes by account.
account numbers, okay.
Correct, yes.
And I think when they say present the town budget, I would assume that somebody should make some comments. In other words, we don't just hand out papers and say, do you have any questions? So Zach, would you be willing to kind of spearhead?
I mean, I'm always full of comments, I'm sure I can.
Right, so like say, here's the things you should look at, here's the big changes that were made, here's, what the impact of these warrant articles are, and here's how you would look at the default budget, and then open it to citizens' comments. I don't know how many citizens will show up for our public hearing, but we should give
I'm gonna
them.
guess for 6.
Okay, he's got 6, anybody want a
Any
different?
other takers?
Is there an over-under on this?
Yeah. Yeah, I remember last year's public hearing was not very well attended, so you may be
Well, we had
speaking.
some advertising issues with it as well, though, so it was.
Right, you may be speaking just to us, but we'd love to hear from you.
You know, if you want to listen to me run my mouth.
No, we don't need to vote on that, I don't think. Thank you, Zach, for agreeing to do that. So I think the school people are probably in pretty good shape. And look at that, Zach, you can even stay for the town part.
I am so excited, but if we are through with the school budget, I would,
Do while we have everybody here, do we want to?
is there any other
Open up for
questions?
citizens' comments just before we let all the school people go, if we're going to let them go?
Okay, regarding
Yeah, if
the
anybody has any citizens'
school,
comments on the
right.
school budget.
Yes, Harriet, would you like to move to the microphone, please?
Oh, now I got to remember which one of these is I think it's 3.
Oh, how to switch it? You got it.
First try.
He's been practicing.
I don't have the school budget, so I couldn't follow you along on that, or the engineering report. But one of the things that bothers me is the comment at the end of articles saying, no taxation increase. There is a taxation increase, because if the money was returned to the people, it would lower taxes. And I want that statement taken off the articles. If it's necessary, I'll go to the legislature and have the law fixed so they understand there is an impact. But I really think if it's not something by law we have to put on, it should come off. Second comment is, by putting small items such as a kiln into a trust fund, the citizens are not getting a voice on saying, no, we don't want you to buy that, or yes, we do want you to buy it. Items that are expenses to having the school or having the art program should show up in the budget so the people understand what we're buying. There is so much stuff lately that has, well, for the last 5-10 years, that both our selectmen and our school boards are putting in trust fund rather than showing in budget. And we're once again allowing the boards to make decisions that are citizens' decisions. I have been asked repeatedly, why aren't raises shown in warrant articles the way they used to be? They want to know what raises are being given, not by the board giving the raises during the year, but rather the raises showing in budgets. And that comes to me constantly. So I think that the Budget Committee needs to look at what people want to know out there. And what they want to know is, where are we spending money that we get to make a decision on? Saying $75,000 or $25,000 put in trust, all they hear is you're putting in a savings account. Then they don't hear what the board does during the year to expend those monies.
Zach, I maybe misheard you, but I thought you said that you were going to have some sort of hearing to
Yeah, the next meeting.
present to the public what is being done with the trust funds.
So prior to pulling money out of a trust, you have to have a public hearing. So at our next meeting, the 14th?
School board
School board
meeting.
meeting, yeah, 14th? 16th, 17th, 16th, sorry. At our 16th meeting of the school board, we'll be having a public hearing to hear from the public prior to drawing the funds out of the, that particular trust fund. The amount will be right about, I think it's at 50,000 and a little bit of change. I don't have the exact number, but basically 50K. So that's coming up at our next board meeting. And then the language in the warrant articles is prescribed by law. So that is, the no amount to be raised from taxation is prescribed by law.
Yeah, it's interesting about the, I think you could say the wording might be able to be changed. Actually, last year I questioned it, and Jack Hutchinson, our retiring moderator, actually came back and kind of nudged me and said, you could go up and make a proposal to change it to the wording to say no amount to be raised from current taxation, to be taken from surplus that was previously taxed, or some sort of wording. In other words, he said that piece, the wording could actually be changed to make sure that people understand, and I hope people do understand, that if you're taking it from surplus, particularly with the school, where there's a mandated only 2.5% retention, if you're taking it from surplus, you are affecting the tax rate because there'll be less surplus going back. So I think one thing that you or someone, Harriet, could work on would be what could be some alternative wording to make it more clear to people. Again, I'm not 100% familiar with whether we have to have that exact phrase, but if that phrase could be expanded to say, okay, folks, the surplus will be less, and therefore, it will affect your next tax rate. There's definite impact.
I understand that, most people don't, but I would like to make a comment to this so-called public hearing. As we all know, public hearings are a farce. If one or two people show up, we're lucky.
And
There is-
I don't know whose
there-
fault that is,
The fault is basically, one, people not taking an interest in their government and thinking going to town meeting settles it. But two, a public hearing held at 6 or 5:30 when people are coming home from work is hardly allowing all public to be there. Although I will qualify that by saying most people don't want to be there. That also is a law that needs to be changed. Why? Because the public hearing doesn't matter. No matter what the citizens say there, the board still gets to do whatever they want to do. They
Then,
might get enough.
Mary, I want to just not get this into a back and forth. The recourse for citizens is to vote different people onto the school board.
I say the recourse is the law, sorry.
Okay, thank you, Harriet. Any further comments? Okay, with that, I believe the school portion of the discussion is done.
Thank you.
We
Thank you all.
Thank you for coming, but we will continue on now with town business.
And
Yes,
I have some handouts that I,
oh, good. Yeah, John said you had a few,
a couple.
Additions
Hopefully people
or
have
changes.
saved their revenue projections and those. What I'm handing out on the legal size pages here are the trust fund holdings for the town. These are
That's
capital
not
reserve trust fund holdings as well. The previous pages that I handed out were half the trust funds essentially.
oh, right.
And you will find the trust funds referenced, oops, I think I gave you two.
I think you did.
You'll find the trust funds which Zach referenced and the trust funds that appear in the town warrant articles as well referenced.
If we raise their budget, can we get them a bigger font?
I also have a copy of revised warrant articles.
Wow, that is a tiny font. I hadn't worked my way down.
It's the fit on one page thing, huh?
Essentially. And some of these trust funds are extremely old.
It's like the Women's Relief Library Room.
Some of them date back to almost the Civil War.
Oh, the Women's Relief Corps Room, okay.
Kind of fascinating
No,
to
that's,
see what's
we have a bunch of really odd ancient ones. I mean,
Whoa.
There's probably been $50 in that for the last 150 years.
Okay. And John said something about you might have some changes to the operating budget.
I do. I would, at whatever time you deem appropriate, like to suggest some reductions in the operating budget.
Okay, so I think before we vote on Article 1, because Article 1 right now has a number for the operating budget, which agrees with my assessment of changes we've made to date. So if we're going to make new changes, I think Article 1 would have to say a different amount. In other words, it's $4,248,967.
We'd have to vote on that first. We'd have to
Wait.
do changes first.
Right, we'd have to do changes first before we can vote on Article 1.
And if it's
Andy.
appropriate, I would at this time like to move that we reduce the operating budget in warrant Article 1 by $28,000,
And even 28?
even $28,000.
And do you have line items that you're
Don't we have to
adjusting?
I do, and if we get a second,
Second.
Okay. Andy Robertson has moved that we remove $28,000 from the operating budget, and it was seconded by Alden.
Zach can have that one.
Sorry, Alden. Zach Langlois.
Don't we
Okay.
have to
and-
vote to open the budget? That's what I was
I
starting to
think
say.
we can, I think if we're making this as a bottom line adjustment, and Andy
Okay.
can reference the line items, the town administrator can just move the money throughout the budget after we make the dollar amount adjustment. If there's specific lines they have in mind.
Okay, without reopening specific portions of
I
the budget.
believe, I mean, Andy can.
Andy?
yeah, I can give you the specific items that we're looking to take the reductions from.
Okay.
The first is $5,000 from the government buildings line, and that's line 01.4194.01.430, the repairs and maintenance line to be specific. And we would like to reduce the painting for the town hall Not that we are not going to paint the town hall. We've encumbered funds from this year's budget to move forward with painting of the town hall.
So general government buildings, repairs and maintenance being decreased by $5,000.
Right.
Okay,
We would also like to reduce by $6,000 the town hall repairs and maintenance budget. That's 01.4194.03.430, and this would be for the purpose of painting the town hall as well. Typically, we attempt to do 2 sides of the town hall each painting cycle. We're essentially looking
call.
to encumber the costs of those 2 walls
and,
from this year's budget.
okay, and how much was that reduction as well?
$6,000.
6,000. Okay, so town hall maintenance is the line name, and that would be a 6,000 reduction to town hall maintenance,
Right.
okay?
And the third and largest reduction that we would be looking to make is a $17,000 reduction from the George B. White Building section of the budget. That's 01-4194.02.430, and this is the repairs and maintenance line of the GBW budget. And essentially, what we're looking to do is to, the proposed parking lot ceiling, striping, and reworking of the walkway that the children use to exit the school bus to go to Parks and Rec, which is essentially on that side of the building and in very bad repair with a fairly steep grade and some rocks and such sticking through it. And we would look to do that from this year's budget. And the selectmen have already voted to encumber these funds from this year's budget.
Oh.
So that's a total of $28,000. And
Which would change the bottom line. Instead of 4,248,967, the new bottom line budget would be 4,220,967, if I've done my math correctly.
I believe that.
John?
Just a question, Andy. I know from my other hat that I wear that there's quite a list of things to bring the building into compliance. Was there any consideration by the selectmen of keeping that money in there and adding projects to, that we have a fire alarm and stuff like that that we're going to need to be looking at?
There was not. We feel we have a plan to address the issues as needed. We're concerned at the increase of the budget this year, percentage-wise, and felt that we couldn't add a whole lot more to this budget and have a realistic chance of it passing.
Okay, which is a valid argument for sure.
Okay, with that said, Alden, yeah.
On the encumbrances, did you guys end up encumbering the VZ Park maintenance money that you had talked about?
We did not. Essentially, what I'll give you the total rundown of encumbrances because it was a little bit more than the 28,000. From the operating budget, we encumbered the $5,000 and the $6,000 amounts and the $17,000 amounts that we've discussed. The only other item that we encumbered was $3,300 for the cemeteries, and this was at the advice of the Cemetery Commission for the gate repair at the Batchelder Cemetery. This is a historic cemetery on, I believe, South Road, which has a wrought iron gate that is attached to stone. Some stone work and iron work is needed on the gate. It's not cheap, and the Cemetery Commission was looking to do that. We had some money available, so we decided to include that as well. We didn't reduce their budget by that amount, though, because they have a considerable amount of work that needs to be done.
Any other discussion? Okay, so we're voting on a motion to change the bottom line of the operating budget to a new number of $4,220,967. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Yes, that's a 9-0 recommendation.
Well, that was for the change, then we'll have to do the recommendation.
Oh, right, we've changed the
Yeah.
bottom line of the operating budget. Now Andy
So
can,
I will move that we move to recommend the Article 1 as as amended, or as changed.
Second.
Okay, Article 1. Will Diane have access to this, or do we need to read the full article, do you think?
She'll definitely have access to this. I don't feel there's a need to read the entire.
Read the entire article, okay, so, but I think we should mention the
Let me say
two,
the amount again.
the $2 amounts, because there's the operating budget and then there's the default budget amount as well. So in Article 1, the new operating budget total will be $4,220,967. Should the article be defeated, the default budget shall be $3,918,588, which is the default budget as, last year's budget as adjusted by law. So, any discussion of Article 1? Okay, all in favor?
I'm sorry, I just have a question.
Oh, sure.
Is there also going to be, there's going to be a minuscule change, but would there be a change to the estimated tax impact for the proposed budget?
Yeah, I can speak to that. The proposed tax impact is based on I don't know how to say this exactly, but just a rough number. The proposed tax impacts that you see in this budget will never come to fruition. It doesn't account for
Any revenues?
revenues surplus that we use to offset the tax. So if you add these up in any given year, you'll find that the tax rate estimated by, the warrant article recommendations might be anywhere from $30 to $54, and never comes to fruition. One of the things that I typically mention at the public hearing is the amount that equals $1 worth of expenditure on the total Deerfield budget, school and town. Typically, that's around, this year, I think it's roughly $575,000, just to give folks an idea. But that will certainly be recalculated. If it makes more than a cent difference, it will show, but.
Just curious, thank you.
At the training session I went to, the New Hampshire Municipal Association said that they would actually suggest that you not give estimated tax impacts for Article 1 for the very reason that it's a fictitious figure. For the other articles, yes, but Article 1, where the revenues aren't taken into account, and again, the effect of surplus and whatever. So I think it's, if you want it there, fine, but if you didn't want to do it, I think it'd be fine as well.
Yeah, we've had some discussion about this over the past 25 years. Some years, there's been a strong argument that we leave it off. Some years, there's been an adamant argument that we leave it on. We've
So
left
it's
it
up,
on.
it's your
We can certainly take
presentation,
it
so.
off, and if the Budget Committee would like to recommend to us that we take it off, I'm happy to bring that back to the,
It's fine with me as it is.
okay.
Okay, so, Article 1, did we vote on this?
Not yet, no. We're in discussion right now.
Okay, Article 1, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That's a 9-0 Municipal Budget Committee recommendation. Article 2, we had already voted on. Article 3 is the Police Department one that we were waiting on till you had a more firm number.
Yeah, and I think that what the Board of Selectmen is intending to do at this point is to change the wording of this article, not the dollar amount, but the wording, similar to what Zach had discussed earlier. We're going to make this up to $50,000. We've received
okay.
We've received an estimate, actually a hard and fast proposal. We'd obviously go out to bid, but we have a hard and fast proposal for the civil engineering costs of the project. Total civil engineering costs were a tick over $28,000, but that included civil engineering through completion of the building. This warrant article is intended to cover preliminary engineering costs and estimates. So my gut feeling, for lack of a better term, is that we're likely to be looking for in the $35,000 range, maybe $40,000 range for preliminary work, but we're not exactly certain at this point. So our discussion has been to change this wording and not the language to indicate up to $50,000.
Did you actually have words after the word for? that we aren't seeing? Because here it says just to be used for,
Yes, we actually did, but they are apparently not showing on this copy. Do you have an original copy? Let me see if I've got.
for the Andy Robertson Retirement Fund?
It's Morse code, you need to translate.
Right, dash.
Looks like SOS to me.
Yep, and actually on the previous copy, that looks to be cut and pasted inappropriately as well. I think maybe the best recommendation for this warrant article is for me to bring it up at the public
At
hearing.
the public hearing?
As a
Okay,
modification, and we can vote on it
okay.
at that time, directly after the public hearing. Just,
So have 5. We don't have
that way I
five.
can put the up to in there as well.
And get the wording of what we might be spending it on.
Right. I'm fairly sure that it says to make it expendable by the Board of Selectmen, but
That's the only one we hadn't voted on.
Okay, we have an Article 5 that was a new article. Andy, do you want to?
yeah, and this is essentially a cost of living warrant article. I would make a motion that, to move warrant Article 5 to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $37,132, which includes additional wages and required benefits for the purpose of providing cost of living raises to town employees in the amount of 2%.
Second.
Article 5, as written, was moved by Andy Robertson, seconded by Zach Langlois.
If I could.
Discussion,
speak to it.
yes, Andy.
Yeah, this was a decision made by the Board of Selectmen. We had discussion about whether we should include cost of living adjustment raises in this year's budget. Just a little research into surrounding towns that are municipal employees that are on, it's not the State Employees Union, but a similar union, see 2.5 annual increases typically built into their contracts. Raymond, for example, is a little bit larger town whose employees are unionized. We looked at some other towns along those lines. Again, we were a little bit concerned about the percentage increase in the overall budget and decided to use 2% as a number. And rather than try to incorporate it into the operating budget, in the past, we've used COLAs as warrant articles to give the town a chance to have a direct say in whether they feel we should do this or not. So we decided to include it as a warrant article. And we felt 2% was a fair compromise between what might be a little high and what might be low.
So this would be for all personnel. We don't have anybody that's under collective bargaining,
We
like
do
the
not.
school does. So this
We
would
don't.
be, other than this, then, there are not raises built into the operating budget.
Well, there may have been,
Oh, I do know of one. Kelly in Town Clerk, I know, had some
right,
raises.
the board
built
has
in.
made some salary adjustments, very few this past year. Kelly, the town clerk, was one of them that we proposed, that, if the operating budget passes, are in there.
Anybody have any other questions? I would like to just note, for purposes of comparison, the town feels that, 2 is somewhere near 2.5, which maybe some other people are getting, and therefore, it sort of reinforces my reluctance to vote, 9% raises for some of our teachers, but that does not have to do with this specific article, other than the comparison that, this is an assessment of what is a cost of living increase. So, any other comments? Okay, all in favor of Article 5 as written?
Aye.
Aye. It's a 9-0 recommendation from the Municipal Budget Committee. The other warrant articles that have amounts, I believe we have already addressed. So warrant articles,
And if I could just briefly comment?
yes.
Yeah, I made a comment previously, but as you go through these warrant articles, you can match these warrant articles up with the trust funds that hold the money on the trust fund sheet that I handed out, so you can see what we've got for balances in those funds.
And with the trust fund situation, I guess, I wasn't aware till Zach said it, that to expend funds out of the trust funds actually requires some sort of notice and hearing. Is that true?
I believe it depends on the wording of
wording?
the creation of the trust fund. Some trust funds,
Oh, the ones that might say, authority is given to the Board of Selectmen as agents.
as an
to
expendable trust
and
fund.
an expendable
I
trust fund.
believe there's an amount cutoff too, possibly. There isn't. I'm not sure of the specifics, but I know it varies depending on how the fund was established and the amount you're using.
Okay. We did at some point get a preliminary revenue, it wasn't a revenue projection, it was like year-to-date revenue, and then I know our finance person was supposed to put together revenue projections. Do we have those? Because I think those do have to be presented at the public hearing because they're part of that MS 737 or whatever the number of the form is, and it is a big component of the actual tax rate.
I have a copy of what we handed out previously, which was the revenue report. It's dated November 16th.
Right, that's the one I have.
Right, with the default budget copy too, which I don't know that we have created anything different from this revenue projection.
But we don't actually have a revenue projection. What we have is a revenue report, current year to date, and I believe we need to do a revenue projection
I will have that for the hearing.
for the public hearing.
Rather than the revenue report fund, I guess we can certainly use the state accounting, essentially a worksheet, as I recall.
Right, I think that's what we had last year to show, because again, the revenue is an important part of the tax rate, and if you underestimate your revenue, you've, got a tax rate that's too high, so.
Well, I mean, the revenue ultimately is going to be what the revenue actually is. That's when we create the tax rate, we look at the overlay, we look at the surplus, and that's generated by actual revenue. So we don't take a look at the projections. Really, in taking that, we use the actual surplus and the actual overlay to.
Right, but we're always a year behind, I believe. Sometimes the years confuse me, but when we do this year's, we did this year's tax rate, you had a projected revenue. This year's revenue may actually turn out to be higher than that. So we have paid taxes based on the projection, and in fact, it may create a surplus, which then may come back to us. But, so the projected revenue is important. There was a year where the projected revenue was 1.33 million. It did get adjusted up by the DRA, but in that year, that's the year our tax rate jumped to the 2330. And it wasn't so much that our expenditures were out of line, it was that the projected revenue was much lower than what actually happened. 1.33 became, we had like 1.9 of actual revenue, or something like that.
And typically, and correct me if I'm wrong, John, but we will adjust the revenue reporting throughout the year based on our financial person's review, on a monthly basis. Attempt to avoid that.
So for the public hearing then, we would have a new revenue projection. We also are required to present the default budget, which I know you did give us same time as the revenue projection.
And that is essentially the DRA format for default budget.
Right. And as I mentioned, the only change on the town default budget was a change to the line item, I think workers' compensation, under insurance, because that's a required legal requirement, and you can add in legal requirements. So the default budget for the town is simply going up from this year's default budget of $3,910,923. It's going up to $3,918,588. So that will be presented. We voted on the final bottom line, and I guess the only other thing to discuss is, what will make up the final presentation. Will we be presenting just the I get confused by the form numbers, but I think it's a 737, John, it's an abbreviated form of this. Instead of by line item, it's a smaller packet, right?
It'll be by the account numbers that Amber had mentioned earlier, but you'll have the 737.
Okay, and so we'll have the operating budget, we'll have a
Default
present.
budget, the default
The
budget.
default budget.
And the revenue.
Revenue projection, and.
Warrant articles.
Warrant articles.
Right.
And so that'll be available for public inspection, and we'll make some sort of presentation.
Correct.
You know, and Andy, I may rely on you to do some of the discussion, you know,
Sure.
for warrant articles, et cetera.
May rely on John,
Yeah, exactly.
depending on how detailed they are.
Does anyone have other things to bring up about town business, town financial stuff? And then, I don't know if this can happen at that meeting or not. I guess it probably depends on whether there's any changes. Last year, there's always an issue with signing the actual forms because we have to have a quorum of people that sign the 737 and sign the school form. Will you actually be bringing forms, or do we have to wait to another date?
Yeah, typically what happens with regard to the public hearing is that we hold a brief meeting directly after the
Right,
public
that-
hearing. And if, we can certainly prepare forms based on what we're presenting at the public hearing. But in years past, sometimes depending on input or arguments made at the public hearing, we've made adjustments to the budget at that meeting directly after the public hearing, and that's what's triggered having a revised signature page in the town administrator's office that we are begging people to come in and sign. So if
Right.
nothing changes after the public hearing, we could certainly bring.
Do a quick
pa-
meeting and have people sign?
Yep, and if things do change directly after the public hearing, you know,
Then
they
we'll
would
have to
be
get people
adjusted.
to come in, okay. Okay, so everybody's aware, you know, particularly for new members, there is a signature required that you're signing on, you know, with what's being presented. And again, if there are no changes, we might be able to sign them actually the date of the public hearing. Do we have any more citizens' comments?
I will say real quick, we do have 4 positions open, and the filing period, it begins Wednesday, January 23rd, and ends on Friday, February 1st. So anybody who wants to come join us up here.
Yeah,
You mentioned that I believe there are 2 select board positions up for open as well, so
So go see Kelly if you're interested.
if you'd like to get a closer look into the town budget workings,
Any citizens' comments? Be good.
Move to adjourn?
second.
Zach Langlois has moved to
Did
adjourn,
we put citizens- Did we
seconded.
put citizens' comments out there? I kind of interrupted.
Yes,
I
you
did,
did, we
I
did.
did.
All right.
Zach has moved to adjourn, Alden Dill seconded. All in favor?
All right.
Aye. We are adjourning at 10:25. Thank you all for
Hang on, before we start talking about our